My name is Becky Tan, this is MakingLARP, and today is my hot or nots about the Spring Moot. So it was the first event of the season, and what an event. I absolutely loved it. Now I'm going to get the knots out of the way because it's always better to end on a high, and it has to be said, it was freezing Friday night. It was awful. I've heard people saying it was -5, and to be honest, we spent maybe an hour in character on the Friday night, coupled with the fact that we weren't able to head down until later on, as the wonderful man that drove us there was at work till 4:30, and then going down from Newcastle down to Derby. It was 8 o'clock before we got on site by the time we put up the tent, and then I'd gone for a food run and wasn't icy till nearly 10 o'clock. By this point, with timing having been at 7, we'd already lost several characters and quite a lot of plot had hit off already. Now I don't know whether it's plot or actual player interactions, but there was at least one assassination attempt on the Queen. There were people being dragged off in the night to be murdered by transporting them outside the Ritual of Peace, and all sorts of terrifying things. But unfortunately, by the time I'd got on site, we'd gone down for a pizza and come back to the company tent for a drink. We were all in bed by midnight. It was just so cold and so miserable. It just sapped all your energy and will to get involved. The other big knot, and you know who you are, one of our friends got himself banned for being a dick. I'm not going to try and argue with what he did. Wasn't being a dick, because it was, but I haven't had a chance to talk to him properly out of character yet, or in character, because he was sent off site and it was other people that informed us. But yeah, he needs a talking to, and hopefully he's going to sort his life out. But that really put a dampener on events, as he's heavily connected roleplay wise with Emma's character, and therefore by proxy connected to the rest of the company. And it's just a really sad time, because while I do have some sympathy for how he managed to get himself in that situation, it wasn't like he hasn't been warned repeatedly. The other big knot was some other friends that had to leave the field. Mark and Lindsay, who are our big best grown-up friends, who have things like a trailer tent and warmth and heat, and the ones that taught us all about home brewing and bring proper kegs that are properly carbonated so that you can have beer on tap in our company bar, and just are amazing people, had to leave. Very, very kindly, they left all the stuff when they went home on the Saturday night, and Mark came back and picked it all up on the Monday and spent some time in character. So at least we were able to keep using the equipment, and we chucked some of the very cold people, including my wife, inside the trailer tent for the rest of the weekend, so that at least they had some actual warmth, as it's got proper indoor heating and gas supply and a kitchen and a fridge and all sorts of tricked out goodies. In character, my major knots were kind of what I expected. I am shit at being head of the Lions Encounters. I knew this before I took on the job. I knew this repeatedly when I tried to not take the job. Hopefully it is something I will be able to learn and improve on in time. It was the reason I wanted really to be a deputy to someone experienced for several years before taking on the role in any meaningful way myself. Unfortunately as well, my co-deputy slash, I suppose, my deputy now, as I fell on that particular sword at the Lion Sanction event, wasn't here, which meant that I couldn't just rely on him to deal with all the military side of things. Now, encounters themselves are kind of a weird mix. It's a mix of healing skills and combat skills, which I never use, and the ability they have to dismiss creatures that are from other planes, which generally involves in calling for a wedge, which is a group of people, one hand on each other's shoulders, forming a little pyramid, passing power forward to pop something of a rank lower than the amount of power you're sending forward. So when I lose the person that organises all of that, they don't get organised. So that probably had some level of a effect on Lion's capability in the field. Unfortunately, this did lead to the head of all the arcane schools within the Lions having a chat with me in character and basically saying, stop being so nice and just tell people to do stuff. At which point, at the next muster, I told people and was told no, which really, really didn't help. I'm hoping I can start dragging together a competent team to kind of help out with all this, but I suck so bad in this role. Just at the moment, I don't think there's anybody else who could do it. I did have quite a lot of costume malfunctions with the shiny new hat of Witchery, which I'm sure you guys have all seen the make videos for. I just couldn't get it to stay on my head under the headdress. I'm going to have a play around and work out how I want to change things up for next event. It'll either be me removing the headdress entirely so there's more space in my head, and instead either going back to some sort of hair fall or attaching it directly to the hat and then pinning that to me, or some way keeping the headdress, pinning the hat to the headdress. Which is annoying because it's nice to be able to actually remove the hat and do things like, you know, taking it off as a show of respect and things like that. But if it's not going to stay up and the headdress is supposed to represent my actual hair in character, it kind of doesn't work for me to keep doing that. As well as this, the hat got considerably more and more floppy as the event went on, and ended up not wearing it for the latter half of the weekend. So I will have to do some costume mods in terms of that. Well, there was a death. There were, unfortunately, a member of the Free Blades, which is one of the other groups within the Lions, died. And really, unfortunately, it was his first ever LT event, and his character got killed in 2 minutes. Luckily, after some people had a nice chat with the head office, he was allowed to restart as that character's brother with all the same stats, so he didn't lose out on his new player bonus. But that did leave some interesting conversations to people finding out about what the actual record was for shortest time of keeping your character alive, which I've been reliably informed goes to a BBC reporter that came down to cover the event. Went from God, which is games control, where you make your characters. So he made his character, walked out, got mugged, then went back in, made a new character, came out and got mugged. Which I hope didn't lead to a terribly unfavourable review. But in the end, that's all I can really think of for knots. Which hopefully means there's not really a lot to complain about. It has to be said, the company is in a weird place right now. We have had a lot of losses in and out of character. Obviously not losses out of character, but people that have decided to move on to other groups or just haven't made it to the game. So there was only 6 of us actually there, and 2 of them had to leave partway through, and we had one kind of add-on who we're not sure yet whether her character is actually going to join the company. We're kind of recruiting, kind of not. In the HOTS, it has to be said that we've become a lot more cohesive as a group, and we really had a good kind of in and out of character meeting and worked out where we all stood and what we wanted the company to be, which is a lot closer to a family than it is a mercenary group. So hopefully from now on we'll be able to kind of push characters that are thinking about joining in the right direction and get the right people in that's really going to make the group work, rather than getting a huge group and having a bunch of infighting, which is unfortunately kind of what happened. In terms of the company, the other big hot is that we have a new company tent, and it is glorious. It's probably about twice the size as our previous tent, and even if the size difference isn't quite that much, the way that it's shaped has made a huge difference in terms of making it the kind of space we want to use. It's not just our group's home, it's also an in-character bar, so actually having it set up like a bar so that people can kind of go to the bar and then come have a different space to sit down in and all that kind of stuff made a huge difference making it feel right. We just need to kind of work on decorating it more, but as it's its first event there, that's something that'll probably go on as we do, with little bits added here and there. Out of character, I think my biggest hot is the same thing it is every year. It's seeing all the people that I only really get to see at events. Being able to catch up with people in and out of character, make new friends, see this whole big world built and all the set dressing and the monsters and the teams and efforts that gets put in for my benefit. Yes, for everybody else's, but for my benefit. People put on a really good show. Most of my hots come down to lots and lots of little individual chats in and out of character with people. I've got to say I didn't really interact with anyone in more than a group of about 20, and that was at big proper meetings. So it was the small little role play moments and the chats and the finding out bits and pieces of information that way that was great. So we've had everything from deep existential angst about what is right and wrong to the concocting there and then of cocktails with people at the bar, including what I desperately needed, as you could hear from my voice, the Marshall's Own cocktail, which is essentially an alcoholic strepsil made with mead and limoncello, and then adding to it Jack Daniel's honey to make military grade strepsils, which was delicious and very much needed. The really, really big thing for me of the weekend was all the involvement I had with the Human Awakening Stone. I was in one of the rituals to empower it, and we got an amazing result from doing it that way. It's one of those things, I don't want to talk about the technicalities of what humans got. If you know in character, you know. So I'm kind of going to leave that as a find out in play sort of thing. But what the Human Stone does and what awakened humans get is pretty awesome. It's not game breaking, it's not ridiculous rah power, but it's what humans are, which is the jack of all trades, able to do a little bit of everything, generally be that little bit more survivable. I've got to say, for me, the biggest coup is actually the one that's connected to money. There's a skill on our new law sheet that allows people that already have the skills that give them money once a year to get it at every event. And because I'm one of those people, that's actually calling to me more than the really higher powered stuff. But the actual role play around the stone in terms of doing all the practices to do the ritual itself, being part of the ritual itself, being part of the politics of the fact that the Lions faction is kind of in charge of the stone, and dealing with, because we're a good faction, making it as fair as possible for everybody else to get a chance to be awakened. Now personally, I haven't been awakened yet. I believe I am currently the prime candidate for the next time the Lions take their turn, because there are 10 factions and we are doing this fairly and everyone is taking a turn, which would mean I would get awakened at the gathering, barring death or some sort of involvement in a ritual that makes it happen sooner, but also being quite involved in character with the protecting of the stone, because I'm a transporter, because I can do ritual magic, and therefore going around and grabbing people to come and protect me whilst I go wander across the field to go to a transport circle to go take it off site, and the actual sort of mild level fear of no one knows it's me, so I should be alright. Right? If we do this soon enough, everything will be fine. That was quite unnerving, but a fun little bit of role play, and again, because it led to me having small little groups of people coming to protect me, led to some good kind of role play and chats that I wouldn't necessarily have got to have otherwise. As I said, I'm head of the Lions and Canters, and the half of the job that I actually vaguely know how to do is the ecumenical stuff. And I just love saying that word. Ecumenical. It was the word of the weekend. So I deal with the ancestor Wibblies. Now there was a lot going on in terms of stuff. There was one big Wibbly thing going on, and it was mostly dealt with by other people, but they kept me in the loop, which was great. But it turns out that if, say, the Encanters Guild and the people in charge of liaising with me at the Encanters Guild, or say when I went down there, people had talked to me and told me what was going on, we could have kind of come to the solutions or the information that we needed a lot sooner. As we weren't aware, the Wibblies were a cross-faction problem. So that's going to be an interesting bit of plot in the future. We also, as Lions, because of the world plot, had a lot of big picture discussions going on. We are the goodest of the good factions, essentially. We do not view unliving as people. We do not allow necromancy. We do not allow corruptions. We don't allow trading in necromancy and corruptions on our lands at all. You come into our faction and you are undead. You are not a person, and we hold no responsibility for what happens to you. And everyone knows this, and therefore most people play by the rules. Therefore, when the game world is having to decide between essentially 3 factions on the plane of unlife and who gets to rule it, we were put in a really tough place, because one of them went, hey guys, I'm not actually evil, I'm just undead. Or I just happen to live on the planes of unlife. I'm not 100% sure on the situation because I've heard it explained 2 or 3 different ways. So I don't know which one is actually true. But yeah, there's an ancestor whose part of his job is making sure people that are dead go where they're supposed to be. In the Law and Trust, we use the term patterns rather than souls, and ancestors rather than gods. So there's this guy saying, hey, if you put me in charge of the planes of unlife, I'll give you all of your patterns back that shouldn't be here. And some other stuff. And probably, you know, it'll take some research, but it's totally what I want. We can remove the plane of unlife from Adrea completely. And the Lions faction having to sit there and go, but you're undead, and we don't make deals with undead. And actually, whilst it seems to be the faction consensus, you're undead, we don't make deals with undead, we'll deal with the bits that are on this plane because it hurts Adrea. There was a lot of really good roleplay going around in the Lions faction, and deep discussions with characters I wouldn't have even expected to talk to, let alone have this level of debate with, about where is the line? Do we draw this line because it's our line? And what happens if we don't draw it? What happens if we say yes? What happens if we don't say no? And we just do what we were going to do anyway because it's the right thing to do. And if we get rewarded for it, fair enough. And that was really quite an interesting discussion we had. Personally, my character was quite pragmatic. She was on the side of, if he really means it, and if his word means anything, then we don't need to side with him, because this is what he wants and he will do it anyway. And if he doesn't mean it, then we haven't sullied our hands by saying, yes, we are going to side with you, but if our actions do lead to that particular ancestor taking control and he gives us stuff, no objection, we don't have to actively say yes. A lot of our faction came down the side of, he's undead, we don't deal with undead. And we tell him, no, we're doing what needs to be done to protect Adrea, which is the more lion course. It is the more good course. So that was really quite interesting. Probably the last major thing that was on my heart was the fun times involving White and Dark Reaver. White and Dark Reaver were originally swords and now they are ancestors. Well, they've been worshipped as ancestors, I know that much. But they certainly have physical embodiments now that aren't swords that go around making life hell for encounters. Specifically, White Reaver hates unliving. Really, really hates unliving. A lot. And at least when he was a sword, his method of dealing with this was finding the nearest light incanter, possessing them by making them hold the sword, and then sending them into a crowd of unliving, where the unliving killed them all, because White Reaver didn't really care if you died. He just cared about killing all the unliving. Dark Reaver just likes killing light incanters. Guess what I am? So I was watching a Olog and Uruk ritual, which is basically the two overarching types of all your kind of orcs, goblins, trolls, all those kind of creatures. They were doing some fun stuff with their Awakening Stone and went as a show of support, saying, hey humans, we aren't all bad, we want you guys to catch up, we don't want another race war, we're here to help. At which point the ritual ended and Dark Reaver's minions walked into the circle and I ran away. I ran away quite a lot. I ran away all the way back to the Lion's camp and then I shouted to all the incanters, prepare yourself, Dark Reaver is on the field. Luckily he didn't actually come down to the camps, but there was stuff going on at the marketplace, but I wasn't anywhere near there because that would have been stupid. The other big fun thing was the roleplay from picking who would be our faction champion at the Encounter Trials. This was the sort of thing where I didn't know what was going on and I kind of thought my Deputy Forg was dealing with it and it turned out he wasn't actually there. So I basically had half an hour to pick people. So it basically involved me running around the Lion's camp going, who's awake? Who wants to do the Encounter's Trial? Grabbing the 3 people that actually said, okay, getting them to talk it out, one person essentially being chosen by group as one of the 2 dropped himself out and the other one was an IC friend of mine and I thought it wasn't really fair. And then dealing with all the fallout from that because I don't think anyone in the faction was actually happy with my choice, especially not the Crowns. But I'm like, I'm shit at my job. I told you I would be. Yeah, so that was quite interesting and fun and dealing with the fact that whilst I know that the person playing her is lovely, the Queen gave me dodgy looks every time she saw me, whilst our little group was having the middle of a wibble about whether the lines are good enough and priorities and stuff, was quite interesting, especially as the company has 2 of the big faction roles in it, and at least last year there was a possibility of us all leaving the faction after the fallout and break off of some of the group was really quite interesting and fun. I think the fact that I actually get on quite well with some of the other Crowns really helps. But yeah, it's a very weird feeling being kind of in charge of the Incanters and like every time you go to speak at a muster, the Queen just glares at you. It's like, I thought I was supposed to get this information out. So yes, good times, interesting roleplay. And I don't think I've even covered the half of it. There's probably way more stuff, but I could sit here and talk here for hours. So I want to give a big thank you to everyone that I managed to roleplay this weekend, especially the company. A big shout out to Matt, Mark, Lindsay, Sarah and Cammy, and of course my wonderful and infuriating wife Emma and her paladinly stick up her arseness for the weekend. You guys were fantastic. If I haven't shouted you guys out enough, go Free Blades, go Squad D, go Lions. Look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks' time. Bye!